Being a salesperson all my life, I have imagined sales to be the single most driving force behind business success until I met John Lincoln, who taught me the importance of marketing and leadership to drive change. John is a senior commercial level CXO with over 30 years of global strategy, operations, and people leadership in major telecom across America, Europe, Middle East, and Asian markets. He has managed over $1 billion P&L with leadership responsibility for a team of 1,000 plus members. I am so fortunate to have John in my first podcast to discuss the much required topic, leadership in crisis. Thank you, John, for joining us.
Thank you, Rashid. First and foremost, it's an honor and pleasure to speak at your podcast, and glad to be on the first one. And I think it's a great initiative that you're doing, and I think it's very timely, and it's good to call different folks to get their insights, and I'm very impressed with what you're doing. Yes, indeed, I think the timing is also good because of the current pandemic, and these are really unusual times and circumstances that humanity is facing. And I think it's a great time and opportunity to launch something like this.
Right. I would like to jump directly to discuss the current challenges faced by most leaders during this ongoing pandemic crisis, which has in fact changed the current role and responsibilities of most leaders. There has been a major shift in priorities for leaders before and after COVID-19. Before, the focus, as you can imagine, John, was to foster innovation, drive revenue growth, gain market share, also expansion plan. And now the responsibilities and focus has shifted to controlling cost, managing liquidity, as well as new challenges faced like not getting enough credit from suppliers to logistics issues, shortage of staff, planning for the health and safety concerns of the team, and also working remotely. Leaders who aren't regularly tested for their leadership muscles are now on the spotlight. So, John, what are some of the behavioral changes expected from leaders in such a crisis?
I wouldn't say there is really a change required, because leadership requires a certain element of presence of mind and thought and authenticity, and none of those things changes. Your leadership priorities and strategies and tactics might change, but as leaders, to what you're expected to do, those fundamentals don't change. That's my view. I know it's a little bit, you could say that it could be a little bit contradictory to say that, but being the contrarian that I am, I would love to re-emphasize that. Leaders don't change, Your priorities do change with the times.
Yeah, so in terms of behavioral changes, is there something that the leader has to do today that he wasn't doing in his normal course of action?
Sure. The first thing is that leaders would have to do is because people are the most important aspects of any organization. You can't be a leader without people behind you or with you. So the leader has to assure the people that although these are unusual circumstances, these are some things that an organization or a unit can overcome. And this is not insurmountable to overcome. That assurance and that confidence has to be given to the flock, if you may. That's very critical that we do that immediately. And other than having to reprioritize the strategies and tactics that you have to do, you also need to show that there is a presence and a symptomatic presence that you need to show to your teams in order to know, so that they know that you're there for them if the need arises. You can't be an absent leader. Although people are working from home, most people could be working from home, the leader needs to have, quote unquote, a presence with the team right now more than ever.
And what do you think would be the worst thing a leader can do during this crisis?
One of the worst thing is to show the team that they are in disarray, or this are very times to be frightened, to show fear and to show uncertainty. It doesn't mean the leader should not be authentic. The leader has to be authentic, but it's a fine art. Being authentic and at the same time exceeding confidence and assuring people that the team will get over the hump, what's happening right now. And the other worst thing that the leader can do now is not to be available, not to be quote unquote present. So the leader has to have ubiquitous presence with the team now more than ever. And that presence doesn't mean a physical presence. The leader has to be in constant communication and constant touch with all the people, and has to be very, very clear and succinct in their communications of and directives of strategy and tactics. They cannot be in a way that is very ambiguous or not sure, or something that shows a lack of confidence and so forth. So these are some of the changes that leaders should do now, other than what they have been doing before.
Right. So are you saying that leaders, it's okay for them to show their vulnerability during these times?
No, absolutely not. Vulnerability, I know we all say that it's good to be human and vulnerability, but I'm referring to leaders who run commercial organizations and for-profit organizations. To show vulnerability, it's good to show vulnerability in a drama or a love affair and so forth. You show authenticity as a leader, but vulnerability in the sense that to show that you're weak or that you are vulnerable to failing. And those are things that a leader should not show. Leaders should show confidence, should show that he or she knows what they're doing, should show the direction as to where they're heading to, should show the changes in the direction where they were from where they are to going now. Those things have to be very explicit or implicit when the leader communicates. But to show vulnerability in terms of fear and other things, definitely not. I would not agree with that.
What would you define as a litmus test of a leader during these times?
The true litmus test for a leader now is to really not just show the confidence and all the other aspects that are necessary to bring an organization or a team out of the predicament they are in today, but to actually come out of it. That's the true mettle of leadership. It could be it should be retaining the key employees, to assuring their key customers to stay back with them, or convincing the banks to extend the additional credit that they required, or to convincing the suppliers to extend credit that might not be normally required. So the leader has to show, not only through words or through his symptomatic actions, but actually have to prove his or her capabilities by actually delivering results. Results matter at the end of the day. It's nice and dainty to be good and to speak the walk, to talk the walk, but you have to walk the talk as well for people to accept you for your authenticity and for who you are as a leader. The leader has to deliver results in the end of the day. Mostly, folks are normally very patient with leaders to give them the time and opportunity to come through, but that patience would run out very soon when things go south. So leaders have to be very determined, very structured, and very focused to make things happen as and when is required. That is a true test for leaders in these times. Results do matter.
You talk about opportunity in every crisis. What is the opportunity in current pandemic experience like this one?
In terms of, depending on the type of business you are, I believe there's an opportunity for everyone. But in terms of opportunity, let's take the business that we know. There's an opportunity for most folks to digitize their business. In fact, many of them are still staying in the dark century. Things that could have been digitized long ago, they are still on the analog mode of business. Those things could be digitized, from how they contact their customers, or how they engage with their suppliers in the supply chain, or how they pay their vendors or employees, or how they manage their employee information. All those aspects, the entire resource planning of an organization could be digitized now. And it's a huge opportunity for leaders to realize that not only it will save them costs in the long run, but also it will be sustainable. It actually enhances the customer relationships or the incremental customers that they can get and so forth. There's a huge opportunity for that. The other thing that most leaders would realize from this, and this is quite controversial in some terms, number one, you don't need the spaces, real estate space, that many people think that you need to have the employees structured in an organization. They all need to be, co-located in one space, in cubicles and so forth. I think that sort of thinking mode it should not be the norm anymore. Secondly, I think there's an opportunity, when you look at hierarchies and layers of organization, you have so many layers of organization, then you realize that not everybody is doing their fair output. So maybe there's an opportunity to reorganize and rationalize the organization in terms of the number of people that are required to do a certain activities, tasks, or strategies or tactics. So it's a tremendous opportunity, not just on digitization, one, secondly, on the real estate space aspects and the costs associated with that, and thirdly, and last but not least, the very important aspect is re-rationalizing the organization itself. Structures as we know it, I don't think will last. So those are major changes changes which are opportunities for any organization. Of course, there are direct opportunities if you're involved in the business of digital, providing digital services or telecom services. There are other opportunities because everybody wants to be digital these days. So those are direct opportunities. But every organization has these three opportunities that are related to, and I repeat that. Go digital more faster, like now. Secondly, rethink the real estate space and costs associated with that today they think about. Thirdly, rationalize the organization structure, the number of people, and so forth. These are huge amounts of money in savings and opportunities for an organization that I'm referring to.
In fact,
hope that makes sense.
Yeah, absolutely. In fact, there are companies who are looking at remote staff, and when they consider work from home, and then the thought comes that if it's work from home, why do we need the staff even in the same country? So there are...
Yeah, exactly. That's why I said the real estate aspects of it, Do we need the same country? Do we need the space? Do we need people all to sit in the same place? But more than that, the third aspect is rationalize the organization. If today the divide and rule in an organization is so high that work is not cut into so many pieces, in actual fact, when you expect a normal employee to work, unless somebody is doing a task like being a cashier or a waiter in a coffee shop, most office jobs, most people are not productive 8 hours a day, if you really think about it. That would beg the question, how many people do you really need in that organization to do X amount of work? That is a question that you think about it. So I think the flat organization is going to become a reality. I think many smart companies will realize that soon. Of course, it's going to be very painful for the non-performers and the people caught on the wrong end of it. But if you are a business and if you are a leader, it's an opportunity at the same time. Of course, people need to reinvent themselves, and there are always casualties on every side of the equation. So anyway, that's my view. And I know it's going to be a very controversial view, but I wrote about this the first week when the lockdown happened, that this was going to happen. Before everybody else claimed that this was going to happen, I wrote this on my LinkedIn post. So I'm very, very sure about that. And the other aspect is that one of the other big changes that will happen, Rashid, is that people will also start looking at segmentation of customers differently, in the sense that if you look at any product or service, you will think that does the people have to be together or can it be served separately? It's just like today when you do a home delivery service, they will ask you, do you want no-touch service, for example? So if you take, for example, we all know that events and games are, in the old world, we know that a lot of people sit together and engage, and that's part of the fun. Maybe people will come up with a solution where the game still gets played up in an open field, but it is streamed and people actually participate virtually. Really, with 3D platforms and virtual reality and stuff, people are actually engaged in participating in the game. That could be one aspect. The other one is e-commerce stores. Today, if you look at almost all e-commerce stores, including the great Amazon, it's boring and you have to browse and stuff. Maybe the whole interface will be changed. They make it so attractive, like the real world shopping. You actually browse and all those things people talked about before, like you can put on a shirt, and you can see how you look at the mirror, and you can have that virtual experience. Maybe all these things will come real fast sooner than we realize. 3D holographic stuff will come real. All these changes, I think, are going to be accelerated now with what has happened. I think this is a real reset for many industries.
How do you get your team together while you're working remotely? How do you get the momentum? You want to group together, have the human connection. So how does a leader look at handling this?
Sure. A big caveat to all what I said. It doesn't mean that you can perpetually work remotely. I believe there's a huge opportunity. There is a learning curve that we all learn from others. Humans need to connect and stuff like that. So other than virtually connecting, in the end of the day, maybe if today we meet 5 days a week at a minimum 8 hours a day, maybe the organization of the future will be such that, hey, we meet 3 days a month for 4 hours a day, for the 12 hours maximum, instead of the 168 hours that people today meet. Something like that. People still have to meet, but how do you do that in this environment is that, of course, that's why I say the leader needs to have the presence. The leader needs to have to be, first and foremost, the strategies and tactics have to be communicated widely. Secondly, the expectations and the objectives of each organization and each person under that organization has to be very clear. There should not be room for ambiguity there. So the output and the expected results are very clear. So once that is laid out, then of course the leader needs to have quote unquote the presence with the team. The leader doesn't mean the leader has to be the number one guy in the organization or the number 10 guy. There are real leaders that leaders people look up to. Those people need to have a presence and they need to be encouraged and all opportunity afforded to the organization that this sort of people are more visible and they're able to engage with the team. So people know that everybody looks up to every organization, every creature in this world needs leaders. They look up to someone to make things happen, to in times of crisis or in times when they are very successful, to share their success with. So you need to foster those things and make that become real, whether the virtual world or the real world. But it can't be forever virtual. You need to have, eventually, you need to create an environment that people do get to physically see each other. So we learn from other humans. There are some aspects that are very intangible that you cannot do it virtually, that has to be in person. I need to see how your eyes move. I need to see how your lips quiver. I need to see your body language. I need to the flair of what Rashid is. That element is very important for human connections as well.
So if the virus is, we have a solution, let's say there's a vaccine, would you suggest that we should still work from home and have a balance between working from home and...
I would. Yeah, of course. If you had known me from before, Rashid, I don't believe in time and place. I believe in results. So this is nothing new for me. It just so happened now everybody is talking about it. I think you know me now 7 years. That's the first thing I should tell you guys. I believe in results. I don't believe in time and place. I believe there should be a common time that people should be available. So you can't wake up in the middle of the night when other people are busy at work. No. So there should be a pool of 4 to 6 hours a day. People should be commonly available. Doesn't mean in the same place, but they should be reachable, should be connectable, should be contactable. But place doesn't matter at all. But once a while, they should be able to engage with each other and connect with each other. And maybe you cannot do the whole thing virtually and digitally forever, because there is a learning curve. Like, for example, the question that Pandit should ask now, can e-learning continue for long? Yeah, it can. It can. To a certain level, it can. But from another aspect, it cannot, because there are things, the cues that students pick up and learn how to live in a society, to live with other human beings, how to engage, how not to behave. You can only do a certain amount or a certain aspect of this virtually. You have to do some element of that in life. Same thing applies to office workers and company workers and so forth.
Right. John, there's so much expectation from leaders. What about the stress level on leaders? How does a leader stay motivated?
I think for a person to be considered a leader, that person has to be motivated almost always. I use the word almost always because everybody will occasionally have an off day. It's only human, when our biorhythms are low, when people do get to have an off day. But generally, most leaders are almost always tuned on. You have to be tuned on because you believe that you have a higher sense of purpose. So it depends what the purpose is. As I always, as somebody said on a great TED Talk, I forgot, a very famous author actually, he said, we all know what to do, and some of us know how to do it. But most of us, almost most of us, do not know why we do it. That why. Real leaders know why they do it.
Right.
Why could be beat the competition, or the why could be to make an impact to your team, to share success. There could be many whys. Some might not be as noble as what I'm saying. Some might be just purely greedy because of money or so forth. But generally, people know the why.
I think it's Simon
Sorry.
Sinek.
Yes, Simon. Yes, that's right. Exactly.
John, everyone has a definition of what is leadership. I'd love to know your how you look at leadership. What exactly is leadership?
Sure. There are many aspects of a leader. We say the leader has to be bold, has to be fair, has to have a pleasant disposition. I've written a book and there's a chapter on leadership matters, and all these aspects are there. But to me, one of the most fundamental traits of a leader, the leader should have three aspects of the role the leader must be very comfortable with, which I call the SOP. It's not the standard operating procedure. It is S for strategy. The leader has to have a strategic view, should know the big picture, should know the trends, should know the competitive threats. That strategic view is very important for a leader. Whatever industry or role the leader has, within that context, the leader has to have a strategic overview. Secondly, the leader should, if needed, should have an operational view, should be able to roll up the sleeves and be able to understand the nuts and bolts of the business. It doesn't mean the leader should know how to code or stuff like that, but should have logical understanding to understand the operations of any business they're leading. Last but not least, though, the most important part is people leadership. They have to have the people leadership where they're able to motivate and drive and cajole and nudge and coax and all the elements required to the team at the right time, at the right place, the right pace. That's very important. So strategic, operational, and people leadership are really critical. And the one trait that all this, once you have these three baseline requirements, trait that is required is authenticity. Once your people know you're authentic, they will accept you. Despite all the nudging or the disciplining or anything that you tell them, people know you for who you are and they know you have their best interest, you have the best interest of the stakeholders. There's nothing personal about that towards them. People know you're an authentic person, they will come and follow you. But you need to have the strategic, they need to trust that you have the competency. So the strategic, operational, and people leadership is very critical, but authenticity is one of the most important aspects once you have all that. People may have all the other things, the strategic or the operational or the people leadership, but if they're not authentic, and if they are pretenders, it will not go very far. Or you can summarize in a different way. You need a person who is truthful, who has goodness, and who's useful. You can be useful and truthful, but you're not a good person, it doesn't go far. Or you can be truthful and a good person, but you're useless, it doesn't go far. So you have to pass the three tests, the test of goodness, truthfulness, and usefulness. So that's how I would say it.
Which brings me to the question, are leaders born leaders or are they made?
That's a great question, Rashid, and many people talk about this. I think there are some elements of it, you can say, some intangible elements of it that are born. For example, the gravitas, the gait in which you walk, or your stentorian voice you might have, that gives an aura of leadership. But environment matters. So how you are made, you need the tools, the strategic tools, or the operational tools, or the people leadership tools. Those things are also required. Whether it is 90-10 or 10% born and 90% made, or 90-10 the other way, it depends on different people in different ways. But leaders, not everything is born and not everything is made. Some elements have to come in with your genes, I believe. It could be a very small portion of the elements that are required, but some of it, yes. Like, for example, your gait or your pose or your voice. These are things that you can't change, through practice. You can probably pretend 1 day or 2 days or 3 days, but you can't continuously pretend that. But there are other elements of how you have to, the frameworks, the tools, and understanding the psychology of human beings and understanding the business, the strategic aspect, the operational, the people aspect. Those things need to training. So you're not born with those. So it's a combination of both. But very little of the born with, or most of it made, are trained. Okay.
We have last 2 minutes. Yes, absolutely. I've noticed if you're in a room, John, of people, you make it a point to greet and speak to as many as possible. What's the relation between connecting with people and leadership?
No, that's another great question, Rashid. I always say I'm not a leader without the people.
Right.
around me. You're not leading anything. So first and foremost, you have to take care of people first. The people leadership is the most important. So you have to connect with people. So when I'm in a room and I connect with people, it's genuine and warm, not because, oh, brother, I have to do it. No, I love connecting with people because these are the people who make it happen. And most people we call leaders, very wrongly, I would say, in organizations because by virtue of the hierarchy. And that virtue of the hierarchy means these people are paid a lot more than the average person in an organization. And most of the so-called leaders actually forget they're getting those big bucks because of the blood and sweat and tears of the people below them. So for me, I internalized this deep in my heart because I was not born with a silver spoon. I had to climb through the ranks. And so when I connect, when I walk in the room and I want to shake everybody's hands and look into their eyes and tell them this. I want them to know that, I genuinely appreciate what they're doing. They mean a lot to me. They mean a lot to the organization. These are people that are very, very important. So that's why I do. And, in the end of the day, a leader is nothing without the people around them. They can achieve nothing, almost even zero. You're zilch without the people. I hope most leaders realize that, but I don't think many do.
Right. And one last question. Subconsciously, if one has to perceive the other to be a leader, when does that happen?
So I think it is not the same answer for every one of us, right? I mean, we all perceive different people differently. And then, of course, majority of them can perceive someone to be a leader. That's it. But to answer your question more directly, Rashid, I would say that, if you look, you walk, let's say you're sitting in a jury room, okay? Let's take a simple experiment. And, they have not appointed a jury leader yet. Somebody needs to be voted in, right? And how will they do it? So you will say you can have one person who is probably aiming to be the leader and talks a lot, but people will see through that and say that person is inauthentic. Or they will first and foremost, they look for somebody who is talking sense, who is looking at the background, the context and everything. They will look at that, right? Secondly, they look at the person going through the actual details. Okay, this happened. Somebody who's challenging the questions in this way. And last but not least, people are looking for somebody who's connecting with them. They see this person is fair. So if you go back to my earlier answer, strategic, operational, and people leadership, this is whether we realize or not, people observe these things, but they don't realize this. It doesn't mean somebody is of a certain race, I like the person, or people might mistakenly think so. They might say that, this guy is Chinese like me or is Japanese, so I go. No, it doesn't. In the real world, end of the day, when it comes to the crux, people like to choose people whom they have confidence. They know that this person I can depend on, will make the right thing, the right decisions. This is what people do. Of course, if they are misinformed and miscommunicated too, then sometimes people fall for the hoaxers too. So when you walk into a room, you will know when you see the person who's a leader. Sometimes you don't just see one person, you see two or three persons, and that's when you do the voting and say, well, I prefer this person. At that time, your personal preference might come into being when there are two or three players. But end of the day, most of us, we can see when you walk into a room, who's the guy or the girl who knows what he or she is talking about, who's the person who can really get into the details, if need be, not too much in the details and lose the overall strategy, but all the time. You don't want that sort of person too. And who's the person who's connecting with people, the body language, eye contact, the way it's communicated, can I understand this person? So these are the things that people look for when they say, hey, this guy is a natural leader. That's why people use that expression. Those are my thoughts. Right?
Right. We've run out of time, John. Very good insights. It's been a very good experience, and I hope we can spread this message to as many people as possible. It's my first podcast. I'll do my best to do the outreach. So thank you so much, John, for taking the time with me on this, and we hope to reconnect again and have another session on maybe another topic.
It was my pleasure, Rashid, and I wish you the very best in your endeavor. I think it's a great initiative by you. And you're also a very special guy, Rashid. You will go very far, as I've always told you. So I'm very, very impressed. And by the way, the questions you asked me are really good questions, and nobody has asked me. These questions actually make me, although I didn't make it seem to you like that I was thinking through this. Actually, you really made me think through some of these questions, and they are very good and apt. And thanks again for inviting me to your first podcast.
Thank you. Thank you, John.
Thank you. Bye bye.